Chapter 18, Part 2 of Mary Louise Solves a Mystery by L. Frank Baum. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. The Disappearance, Part 2. But afterward, when they had adjourned to a suite that had now been given them, and which included a cozy little sitting-room, and after the colonel had been ordered to light his cigar, which always composed his nerves, the O'Gorman girl suddenly turned serious, and from the depths of an easy-chair, with her hands clasped behind her red head, she said, "Now to business. Begin at the beginning and tell me all there is to tell." "Haven't I written you something about Alora, Josie?" asked Mary Louise. "Never mind whether you have or haven't. Imagine I've forgotten it. I want every detail of the girl's history." So Mary Louise told it, with a few comments from her grandfather. She began with their first meeting with Alora and her eccentric father in Italy, and related not only all the details of their acquaintance, but such facts as Alora had confided to her of her mother's death and her subsequent unhappy relations with her father and guardian. Alora had often talked freely to Mary Louise, venting in her presence much bitterness and resentment over her cruel fate, as she deemed it. So, knowing Josie's desire to obtain the most seemingly trifling detail of a case, Mary Louise told the story as connectedly and comprehensively as possible, avoiding all personal comment so as to leave Josie's mind free from prejudice. During the recital Josie sat very still, with closed eyes, reclining lazily in her chair and refraining from any interruption. "Now, Colonel," she said, "tell me all that Mary Louise has forgotten to mention." "She has told you more than I knew myself," he declared. "Of course we informed the police of our friend's disappearance, and they sent a detective here who went into the affair very carefully. Yet, so far—" "I know," said Josie, nodding. "I called at the police station before I came here on leaving the train. The detective is Al Howard, and he's a nice fellow but rather stupid. You mustn't expect any results from that source. To be sure, the department might stumble on a clue, but the chances are they wouldn't recognize it even then." "I'm certainly surprised to hear that," said the colonel. "Because you're ignorant of police methods. They mean well, but have so much to handle, in a big city like this, that they exist in a state of perpetual bewilderment." "But what are we to do?" pleaded Mary Louise. "Tell us, Josie." "How do I know?" asked the girl with a smile. "I'm just Josie O'Gorman, a student detective, who makes as many blunders, alas, as a full-fledged tech. But I thought I'd be able to help, or I wouldn't have come. I've a personal interest in this case, Mary Louise, because it's your case and I love you. So let's get to work. Have you a photograph of Alora Jones?" "No," was the reply. "Then give me a word picture of her." Both Mary Louise and the colonel tried to do this, and Josie seemed satisfied. "Now then," she said, rising, "let's go to her room. I hope it hasn't been disturbed since you left it." "The police have taken the key and forbidden anyone to enter the room." "Quite proper. But we'll go there just the same." The room was but a few steps away, in the same corridor, and when they arrived there Josie drew a bunch of slender keys from her purse and unlocked the door with no difficulty. Having entered, she turned on the electric lights and cast a curious glance around. "Let's read Alora's room," said she, while her companion stood listening. "To begin with, we see her nightdress nicely folded and her toilet articles arranged in neat order on the dresser. Chambermaid did that, for Alora's not neat. Proving that her stuff was just strewn around and the orderly maid put things straight. Which leads to the suspicion that Alora was led away rather suddenly." "Oh, do you think so?" "She left the door ajar, but took the key. Intended, of course, to lock her room, but was so agitated by what she saw or heard that she just forgot and walked away." "But no one saw her leave the hotel," observed Mary Louise. "Then she didn't pass through the office, but through the less used ladies' entrance at the side. That was not unlocked, they told me, until after 7. Then she left by the servants' entrance." "The servants'?" "Quite likely. You'll say she didn't know anything about it, or where it was, but the fact remains that Alora left the hotel. I'd like to see that chambermaid. I believe you told me that she comes on duty at 6 o'clock in the morning. All right, I'll catch her at 6 a.m. tomorrow." "The detective interviewed her," stated the colonel. "I know, and she answered all his questions. My questions will be different. If Alora used the servants' entrance, she went out with a servant, or with someone who knew the ways of the hotel intimately." "I don't see that," objected Mary Louise. "Nor do I, but there lies our trail. Alora didn't pass out through the office, nor did she make her exit through the less public ladies' entrance. There are only two other ways to get out of here, through the baggage door and by the servants' entrance at the rear, which lets out into an alley. The head porter will know whether Alora went out the baggage door, but it's usually very high, on a level with the platform of a baggage wagon. I don't believe she jumped it. That leaves the servants' entrance as the probable exit for our missing one, and as she was a perfect stranger to the arrangements of this hotel, she couldn't have gone out that way unless some one guided her. So our course is clear, Mary Louise. Find out who enticed Alora from the hotel, and it won't be difficult to trace her and discover what has become of her." "Enticed, Josie?" "Had force been used, she would have screamed and attracted attention. Let us say she was decoyed." "You think, then, that Alora was kidnapped?" "Let us reason. The girl couldn't have had an enemy in Chicago, according to her history, for she was only 11 when she left here, and no one hates an 11-year-old child. Having no enemy, she has doubtless escaped personal harm. But Alora is an heiress, and a lot of people in Chicago know that. You suggest kidnapping. Well, perhaps that's the solution held for ransom." "That would be the first idea of Jason Jones!" exclaimed Mary Louise. "He has always seemed afraid of such a thing." "In that case, however, I do not believe her father would pay a ransom," declared Colonel Hathaway. "Oh, indeed he would!" asserted Mary Louise, emphatically. "We mustn't forget that if Alora isn't bound and restored to him within a given time, he will lose all her income for the next 3 years." Josie looked at her friend admiringly. Then she laughed. "You're a better detective than any of us," she remarked. "What I've been groping for is the object of the abduction, and you've hit the nail squarely on the head. Now we're getting down to brass tacks, so to speak. The whole thing is explained by the one word, blackmail. Girl disappears, Papa is threatened with the loss of thousands. Very well. Papa, pay up. Relinquish a part of the income, and you may keep the rest. Refuse, and you lose it all. Ergo, Papa pays." "That certainly seems a logical conclusion," admitted the Colonel. "Then," said Josie thoughtfully, "we must decide whether to put it up to Mr. Jones, and let him pay, or to go on with the search." "We'll go on!" exclaimed Mary Louise. "We may be wrong, and poor Alora may be in danger or suffering. We must rescue her as soon as possible." "The girl was in my care," said the Colonel, "and I feel responsible for her safety. Moreover, blackmail is a crime against society, and the plot should be foiled, even were we not interested in the victim of it. I am anxious to find Alora before her father is approached." "Then," Josie decided, "we will leave no stone unturned in our efforts to locate and recover her. If we have diagnosed the case correctly, we have to deal with a shrewd and unprincipled, if not clever, person. Cleverness, too, we may encounter, and then our task will be doubly hard." "Poor dear Alora," sighed Mary Louise. "It's a shame she should suffer because some cruel person wants her father's money. The fortune her mother left her has been a misfortune to her daughter, instead of a blessing." "Money," said Josie sententiously, "is a dangerous thing. Its possession, or the lack of it, leads to 4/5 of the world's crimes. The other 1/5 is charged to hatred and jealousy. But, dear me, here am I philosophizing when I ought to be thinking." "Then think, Josie, and think to some purpose," pleaded Mary Louise. "If our hastily constructed theory is correct," remarked John O'Gorman's daughter, "Papa Jones will soon hear from Alora's abductor, with a financial proposition." "I hope we shall find her before then," returned the Colonel, earnestly. "We ought not to delay an instant, with that idea in view. Indeed, our theory may be quite wrong and Alora be in desperate need of immediate assistance." "Correct, sir," agreed Josie. "But we won't abandon our theory until we evolve a better one, and in following this lead we must first discover who in Chicago is aware of the terms of the will of Antoinette Seaver Jones. Also, who is familiar enough with Papa Jones's love of money to believe he can be successfully blackmailed. What information can either of you give me along those lines?" "Alora has talked to Irene a good deal about that dreadful will," replied Mary Louise. "Irene has repeated many of her statements to me. Also, Alora has frankly spoken to me at times, and her queer history has interested us all. But I cannot remember that any such person as you describe is in any way mixed up with the story. Judge Bernstead drew up the will for Alora's mother. He was her lawyer, and she trusted him fully." "She was justified," declared Josie. "I know of Judge Bernstead by reputation. He died a year ago." "Then," continued Mary Louise reflectively, "there was Mrs. Jones's doctor, who was very kind to Alora, and who also enjoyed her mother's confidence. His name was Anstruther, Dr. Anstruther." "He is a prominent physician in Chicago," declared Josie, who seemed to know every important person of every locality, for this had been part of her education. "It is impossible that Dr. Anstruther could have any knowledge of this plot. Moreover, it doesn't seem to me like a man's plot. I don't believe Alora would have accompanied a strange man, under any circumstances, for she's knocked around the world enough to have learned prudence. The crime is feminine. What woman knew of this will, and was an intimate friend of Mrs. Jones or of Mr. Jones?" "Really," said Mary Louise, "I don't know." "Nor you, Colonel?" "I do not recollect hearing of any woman connected with the Jones history, except Alora's former governess, a Miss Gorham, who was discharged by Mr. Jones at the time he took his daughter from Chicago to New York." "That isn't such a bad clue," Josie returned quickly, sitting up straight and staring reflectively at the old gentleman. "Miss Gorham, eh? Now, how long had she been Alora's governess?" "For some years, I believe." It was Mary Louise who answered this question. "Then she doubtless knew the family secrets. Was Alora fond of her?" "I think not. She has told me that at the time they separated she was glad to be rid of the woman." "Then the woman may be the kind that would resort to blackmail. Discharged from a good place, where she had drawn pay for years, she would be angry. Brooded, during the last 4 years, on her imagined wrongs, and figured out a neat revenge. Had sized up Papa Jones and knew he clung to money with a desperate grip and would pay some rather than lose all. Couldn't get another job, was poor, had no money to chase up Jones, but figured he would sometime return to Chicago and give her an opportunity to play her game. Discovered that Alora had arrived at this hotel and— See here, what would prevent the former governess, now in reduced circumstances, from being employed as a servant in this very hotel, perhaps as a night chambermaid? May have seen Alora enter her room and recognized her former pupil. During the long night she figured and planned how to take advantage of the fortunate circumstances. Early in the morning, before she left here, went to Alora and in some way induced the girl to go out with her. Alora would accompany her old governess without suspicion. So there's the whole story in a nutshell, rather cleverly figured out." "Oh, Josie, it must be true!" cried Mary Louise, who had eagerly followed this plausible reasoning. "And it may not," laughed Josie. "It's just a theory, and good detectives distrust theories, which often befog clever brains. Still, the deduction sounds mighty logical. I'm going to my room now to give the suggestion some serious thought. I'll try to tear it to pieces, or at least to pick holes in it. When I came away Daddy said to me, 'Josie, beware that imagination of yours. If it asserts itself, sit on it.' Daddy was glad to have me tackle the case and to try to help you, for these little affairs give me practice, but he hates to have me make a flat failure. So for dear old Daddy's sake, I'm not going to let any good-looking theory lead me astray. Good night. You'd both better go to bed, for I can see you had little sleep last night. But your strain must now relax, for you've pushed the responsibility onto my poor little shoulders, and now it's up to me to worry." End of Chapter 18, Part 2. Read by Sabella Denton. For more free audiobooks or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org.